My name is Hailey Grant, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the daughter who never quite belonged. I learned to keep my head down, focus on my work, and ignore the way every family gathering seemed to orbit someone else. But nothing prepared me for what happened on my 36th birthday, the night my sister handed me a neatly wrapped box, leaned back in her chair, and said with a smile that wasn't a smile at all, "Maybe this will finally explain why you've always felt like another man's mistake." Inside the box was a DNA test kit. The room went quiet, too quiet. Forks paused midair. Conversations died, and the only sound I heard was the thud of my own heartbeat. I didn't react. I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't ask why everyone at the table refused to look directly at me. Instead, I took the kit, closed the lid, and pretended it didn't sting as much as it did. But the way she watched me, the satisfaction in her eyes, the way she seemed almost eager, told me one thing: this wasn't a joke. She wanted me to take that test. She needed me to. And that was exactly why I mailed it the very next morning. I just didn't know that months later, because of that test, our family's estate lawyer would call an urgent meeting in San Diego, and that a single sentence in a legal document would turn every person in my family pale. If you want to know what that meeting revealed and why my sister's little birthday joke ended up destroying everything she thought she controlled, stay with me. You won't want to miss what comes next. A few weeks later, an unexpected notification flashed across my phone while I was finishing lunch at my office desk. It was an email from the testing company, the subject line simple but heavy: "Your DNA results are ready." For a moment, I just stared at it, my hand hovering over the screen as if opening it might detonate something I wasn't prepared to face. When I finally tapped the message, the summary appeared in a clean, clinical layout that felt colder than any insult my sister had ever thrown at me. The result was unmistakable. No genetic relationship detected with the Grant family reference samples. It didn't matter how many times I reread it, the conclusion didn't change. I wasn't biologically related to the people who raised me. Shock rolled through me in a slow, controlled wave, but years of working in analytical environments had trained me not to panic. I closed the laptop, breathed deeply, and forced myself to focus on what the result meant rather than how it made me feel. Something Karina had set in motion was bigger than a birthday jab, and if she had expected this revelation to break me, she had miscalculated. 2 days later, using the excuse that I wanted to pick up a few old boxes from my childhood, I drove to Mom's house. She didn't question it. She looked almost relieved that I wasn't bringing up the tension from my birthday. I moved straight toward the backyard where the small storage shed sat behind the orange trees Mom had planted years ago. The shed was cluttered like always, stacks of holiday decorations, dusty bins of forgotten crafts, the faint smell of cardboard and old paint lingering in the air. I sifted through plastic containers until I found a translucent bin marked with faded tape. Something inside was wrapped in an old towel. When I pulled it out, a thin layer of dust billowed into the air, revealing a small bundle of loose items. Tucked between a stack of outdated documents was a photograph. The edges were worn, the colors slightly faded, but the image was clear enough. Mom stood beside a man I had never seen before. Both of them, young, smiling in a way that looked too familiar to ignore. Mom's posture was relaxed, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if the photo had captured a moment she wasn't expecting anyone to preserve. I turned the picture over and saw handwriting in ink that had softened with age. Only a few words were written, but they carried the weight of a confession. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope one day this makes sense." The pen strokes were undeniably Mom's. My pulse quickened as a rush of understanding cut through the confusion. This wasn't just a hidden photograph. It was evidence of a past she never intended me to find. Suddenly, Karina's eagerness, her smug expression at my birthday dinner, the way she pushed the DNA test toward me, it all clicked into place. She had known something long before I did. Standing alone in the dim shed, I lifted my phone and took a clear picture of the photograph, making sure to capture both sides. I wasn't ready to confront Mom, not yet, but I knew this discovery wouldn't stay buried. As I slid the photo back into the bin, one thought settled firmly in my mind: it was time to speak with an attorney. The following afternoon, I made my way to a downtown office where the name Olivia Trent was etched neatly on a glass door. Inside the space was precise and orderly, matching the woman who stood to greet me with a firm handshake. She appeared calm, focused, and experienced enough to read tension before a word was spoken. After we settled in her meeting room, I explained why I had reached out. I laid out everything in a steady sequence, the DNA results showing no biological connection to the Grant family, Karina's pointed behavior over the past months, and the photograph of Mom with a man I had never seen before. I placed my phone on the table and let Olivia study the image without interrupting her thoughts. She asked a few concise questions, noting timeframes, relationships, and the context around my sister's actions. When she leaned back in her chair, her expression shifted slightly into something analytical and concerned. According to her gifting, a DNA test in a setting meant to humiliate someone was rarely spontaneous. Inheritance disputes often began with small psychological maneuvers meant to destabilize the person whose position might threaten another's financial gain. She explained that individuals attempting to redirect an estate frequently targeted whoever stood to receive a substantial share. A DNA test, she said, could be a tool not for clarity but for leverage. Olivia then mentioned that similar cases she had handled involved one family member acting long before anyone realized there was a conflict. Sometimes the first warning signs were subtle, like a question posed in a casual conversation. She paused before adding that while reviewing some notes I brought, she noticed the mention of Mom's acquaintance stopping me outside a grocery store and mentioning that Karina had asked about the process of adjusting a will. That detail took on new weight when Olivia linked it to the fact that Karina had recently posted vague comments online, implying that certain people weren't truly part of the family. I had dismissed the post as another passive-aggressive jab. Olivia viewed it differently. To her, it fit the pattern of someone building a narrative before making a legal move. She explained that depending on the assets involved, removing a beneficiary or altering distribution could create strong motivation for manipulative behavior. When I asked if a sibling could influence a parent's decisions after the other parent had passed away, Olivia nodded and clarified that it happened more often than people admitted. Vulnerable parents could be pressured emotionally, financially, or through misinformation. What she found most troubling was the timing: my father's passing, followed by Karina's increased involvement in Mom's affairs, and then the sudden push to expose a biological disconnect. She folded her hands on the table and studied me for a moment before advising that I document everything from conversations to small interactions to protect myself from any sudden changes Karina might be encouraging behind the scenes. As the meeting drew to a close, Olivia's tone grew more direct. She reminded me that families could become unpredictable when inheritance was involved, and that assumptions about stability often disappeared once legal documents came into play. When she stood to conclude our discussion, she left me with a quiet but unmistakable warning. If you are removed from the will, everything shifts in a completely different direction. Early the next morning, my phone vibrated on the nightstand with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced himself as Victor Hale, the attorney responsible for managing my father's estate. His tone was measured, professional, and carried none of the hesitations I often heard from people who weren't sure how to address sensitive matters. He informed me there would be a mandatory family meeting at his San Diego office, and that attendance was not optional. The phrasing caught my attention immediately. Victor didn't elaborate, but something in the way he emphasized urgent suggested the meeting had been planned with a specific purpose, one far more pressing than a routine administrative update. After we ended the call, a notification from the family group chat appeared. Karina had already typed a message decorated with cheerful emojis that felt completely out of place. "Finally happening, can't wait to get this sorted." Mom responded with a single thumbs up, which only made the exchange feel stranger. I reread Karina's message, trying to decipher the excitement she wasn't bothering to hide. Her eagerness wasn't the reaction of someone confused or anxious. It was the reaction of someone anticipating an outcome she believed would benefit her. For a moment, I sat on the edge of my bed piecing together the pattern Olivia had outlined: pressure points, staged provocations, and the quiet buildup before a decisive moment. Whatever Karina expected to unfold in that meeting, she had been waiting for it. I called Olivia and explained the situation. She listened carefully as I repeated Victor's exact phrasing and mentioned Karina's unusually enthusiastic text. Without hesitation, Olivia offered to accompany me, insisting that in inheritance matters proximity to the truth didn't guarantee protection. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had watched too many families underestimate the importance of legal representation. Within hours, travel arrangements were set, and we drove south toward San Diego. The city skyline appeared gradually through the windshield as afternoon light reflected off glass buildings. My thoughts shifted between curiosity and caution as I tried to anticipate what Victor intended to reveal. Olivia reviewed a few notes beside me, occasionally asking focused questions about conversations with Mom or the way Karina had behaved over the last year. The more we talked, the clearer it became that this meeting was not a coincidence. It was a continuation of a sequence that had begun long before my birthday. When we reached the building, a tall tower overlooking the harbor, Victor's office was located near the top floors. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have, its smooth ascent marked only by the soft hum of machinery and the quiet sound of Olivia adjusting documents in her bag. A receptionist directed us to a conference room reserved for the meeting. As we stepped inside, I took in the space without saying a word. The room was expansive, the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a sweeping view of downtown San Diego and the open water beyond it. The sunlight cast sharp lines across the polished table, highlighting the empty chairs arranged with deliberate spacing. There was nothing welcoming about the atmosphere. The air felt still, expectant, as if the room itself understood that whatever happened here would leave no part of my family unchanged. And in that silent, immaculate space atop the city, the tension settled around us like the opening breath before a storm. The tension in the room sharpened the moment Victor Hale settled at the head of the long glass table and opened a thick, sealed folder. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, prompting everyone to fall silent before he began reading Douglas Grant's final instructions. He explained that the will contained several personal statements Douglas had insisted be included, word for word, then unfolded a page written in Douglas's neat, deliberate handwriting. According to Victor, Douglas learned when Hailey was 2 years old that he was not her biological father, yet chose not to confront her mother or allow the discovery to change how he treated Hailey. Douglas described his decision plainly. He believed fatherhood came from loyalty, care, and responsibility, not genetics, and he wanted Hailey to grow up shielded from any doubts about her place in the family. Victor continued reading that Douglas wished for the majority of his estate to go to Hailey because she consistently demonstrated integrity and reliability, and because he trusted her to manage his assets with fairness. The moment those words left Victor's mouth, Karina shoved her chair back and pointed a finger at him, insisting the entire statement made no sense now that a DNA test existed. Her voice rose as she claimed the results disqualified Hailey from receiving anything, and she demanded that Victor skip to the section that proved Douglas intended to prioritize real blood. Victor did not acknowledge her outburst. Instead, he calmly turned to another page in the file and said Douglas had left additional notes addressing concerns about potential manipulation within the family. He read a list of financial transactions documenting instances where Karina had borrowed substantial amounts of money from Douglas with no repayment despite repeated reminders. In the notes, Douglas wrote that he found Karina's explanations inconsistent, and he worried her pattern of taking advantage of him would escalate once he was no longer around to intervene. Victor then read a final paragraph describing attempts by Karina to persuade their mother to pressure Douglas into revising the will. According to his notes, Douglas believed Karina was motivated not by need, but by a desire to secure control over assets she had not earned. As Victor spoke, the shift in the room was immediate. The confident expression Karina carried into the meeting slipped as she crossed her arms tightly, her eyes darting around as though searching for a defense that would hold. The steady cadence of Victor's voice made it clear that Douglas had anticipated this confrontation long before any of them arrived in San Diego, and every documented detail weakened Karina's position. When Victor closed the folder, the silence was thicker than when he had opened it, and for the first time since the meeting began, Karina looked genuinely shaken. A brief, heavy silence lingered before Olivia Trent rose from her chair, with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the storm gathering across Karina's face. She opened a slim folder she had kept beside her and explained that she had conducted a preliminary review of documents connected to Douglas Grant's accounts during his final year, then stated that several irregularities required immediate attention. According to Olivia, digital logs showed that someone had accessed Douglas's financial portals repeatedly during periods when he was hospitalized, and she clarified that the activity aligned with Karina's known login locations. Olivia continued by presenting withdrawal records that matched those unexplained amounts Douglas had noted in his personal statements, and she made clear that the pattern indicated intentional access rather than accidental or casual oversight. As soon as Olivia laid out the evidence, Victor confirmed that unauthorized intrusion into a vulnerable individual's accounts was considered a breach of fiduciary responsibility under California probate standards. He added that this type of conduct could disqualify an heir from contesting a will because it demonstrated an attempt to exploit the decedent for financial advantage. Olivia shifted to a second set of documents, explaining that she had gathered captures of Karina's public posts, each one worded to subtly damage Hailey's reputation by implying she was untrustworthy or undeserving of the Grant name. Olivia clarified that while the posts did not mention Hailey by name, the insinuations were specific enough for acquaintances to connect them to her, which demonstrated purposeful intent to influence public perception during a period when family dynamics were under legal scrutiny. Victor agreed, noting that character attacks connected to inheritance disputes could support a determination of malicious influence, further weakening Karina's standing. He emphasized that the combined evidence, financial interference, and targeted disparagement met the threshold for what California law classified as conduct unbecoming of a beneficiary, effectively stripping Karina of the right to dispute Douglas's decisions. With steady precision, he explained that Karina would be required to reimburse the funds she had withdrawn, and if she failed to comply, additional penalties might apply depending on the court's review. In the middle of the explanation, Karina's confidence dissolved into visible panic. Her shoulders slumped, her hands trembled against the table, and the defiance she had carried into the room evaporated as she searched for any argument that might salvage her position. Each documented detail made her collapse inward a little more, and the weight of the consequences settled so heavily on her that even Mom struggled to maintain her earlier composure. Olivia closed her folder with a measured motion, signaling that her findings were complete, while the room absorbed the implications in a stunned quiet that stretched long enough to feel like a shift in the air itself. As the silence deepened, I looked from Victor to Olivia, and then back to the file containing Douglas's handwritten statements before the question formed in my mind and slipped out before I could stop it. If Douglas knew all of this, what else was he hiding? A faint shift in Victor's posture drew everyone's attention as he reached for a second folder sealed with a red tab, explaining that Douglas had instructed him to present its contents only after the primary will had been fully read and recorded. He opened it carefully, then stated that the man shown in the photograph Hailey had discovered was named Gordon Pierce, a former colleague of Mom from many years ago, and that Douglas had received information about him shortly after Hailey was born. Victor explained that Gordon and Mom had entered into a private agreement around the time of Hailey's birth, one that Douglas respected, but never disclosed to Hailey in order to spare her the confusion and emotional strain he believed such knowledge might cause during her childhood. According to the notes Douglas left, Gordon had recognized from the beginning that the circumstances surrounding Hailey's arrival were complicated, and that stepping into her life would create disruption that neither he nor Mom was prepared to navigate. Victor continued reading, explaining that Gordon had nonetheless maintained an interest in Hailey's well-being and had quietly followed her academic achievements, charitable work, and professional progress, without ever revealing his involvement. Then Victor unfolded a separate document stating that Gordon had established a trust fund in Hailey's name years earlier, structured to grow steadily until she reached an age when she might be ready to decide what she wanted her life to become. Victor clarified that the trust was legally sound and had remained untouched, accumulating value through careful management by a financial firm that Gordon selected before he passed away. He added that Douglas had been aware of this arrangement and had included a note acknowledging Gordon's role, writing that while he raised Hailey as his own, he believed Gordon's gesture reflected genuine care rather than obligation. Victor then retrieved a handwritten letter sealed in an envelope bearing Hailey's name, explaining that it had been left by Gordon for the moment she learned the truth. He began reading aloud. Gordon wrote that he had hoped to meet Hailey when the time felt right, but realized that his presence would complicate her understanding of family, especially given how deeply Douglas loved her. He stated that he had chosen distance not out of indifference, but out of respect for the life she was building and the stability Douglas provided. Gordon expressed regret for the absence that shaped their connection and admitted that he watched her grow from afar with pride, believing she deserved opportunities he could not personally give. The letter ended with a final wish that Hailey use the trust fund for whatever future she envisioned, emphasizing that she owed him nothing and that his only hope was for her to know she had been cared for long before she ever knew his name. As Victor folded the letter and returned it to its envelope, I sat motionless, the words settling into a part of me I had never known was empty, and the weight of the revelation left me unable to speak at all. In the days that followed, the legal consequences took shape with a clarity none of us could ignore. Karina was required to repay every dollar she had withdrawn from Douglas's accounts, and the penalties attached to the misuse of those funds were steep enough that she had no choice but to list her house for sale. The pressure from mounting legal fees made the decision even harsher, and the confident posture she once carried dissolved into something hollow as each obligation closed in. Mom received formal notice from Victor explaining that her remaining support from Douglas's estate would be limited to a modest stipend, one that covered only essential expenses and nothing more. The adjustment was immediate and stark, and although she tried to mask her frustration behind brief clipped messages, it was clear the lifestyle she had counted on was gone. Meanwhile, I found myself withdrawing from the constant noise of family turmoil, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I stopped responding to group messages and muted every channel that once kept me tethered to the role I had been expected to play. Olivia helped me finalize paperwork for a small lakeside house, a quiet place several hours from the city, where the air felt open enough for me to breathe without feeling watched or weighed down. The move was simple. The relief that followed was not. Starting over meant confronting the parts of myself I had spent years pushing aside, and although the adjustment felt strange at first, I learned to settle into routines that belonged entirely to me. With the resources I received from Douglas and the trust Gordon Pierce had established, I created a foundation dedicated to supporting people who had been sidelined or dismissed within their own families. The idea formed quickly, but the meaning behind it grew deeper each day as calls and letters arrived from individuals who had endured patterns eerily similar to mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something that came from my own choices, rather than from expectations placed on me by others. Conversations with Olivia helped me understand that stepping back from Mom and Karina did not require a dramatic announcement. Distance could be a quiet line drawn for my own well-being, so I chose that line and kept it firm. I didn't block anyone, but I no longer reached out, no longer tried to fix what was never mine to repair, and no longer apologized for choosing myself. Seasons shifted at the lake, and with each change, the ache of the past loosened a little more. One evening, while watching the water settle into its calm silver reflection, I finally understood what closure meant for someone like me. It wasn't reconciliation or forgiveness offered out of pressure. It wasn't returning to a family that repeatedly proved unwilling to see me. It was the simple acceptance that I could walk away. There would be no reunion, no softening of boundaries, and no step backward. There was only clarity, freedom, and the future I chose for myself.